Hello and welcome to Clean Chemicals. I'm your host, Aaron Lee, and today's show is brought to you by Chemian, helping companies reduce the carbon footprint of their wastewater treatment process using low carbon technologies. Now, I'm excited to welcome Bethany Dean, the Managing Director and founder of Taylored Consultancy, a regulatory affairs consultancy specializing in quality management and compliance for FMCG companies globally. Bethany's expertise spans medical devices, cosmetics, and food supplements. And since launching her consultancy in January 2023, Bethany has been very busy, if you follow her on LinkedIn. So Bethany, thank you for joining us.
No, thank you for having me, Aaron.
So I imagine the best place to start is if you just give us a bit of an understanding of your background and what eventually led you to founding your consultancy.
Yeah, of course. So my background's been working in quite large corporates, so the likes of Reckitt, Benckiser and Johnson & Johnson in their regulatory team. I did way back when start in R&D, but quite quickly learned that the lab wasn't for me anymore. Apparently, I much prefer sitting behind a desk drinking coffee. So that's what led me into regulatory. For complete transparency, I was on the Future Leadership Programme at Reckitt, and everyone said to me, go into regulatory as part of your rotation. You'll learn it and then you'll never have to do it again because it's a nightmare. So I thought, right, 6 months, I'll do it and I've ticked that box. And yeah, what are we now, 10 years later, and I'm still doing regulatory. So apparently I enjoyed it. I did try and escape. I did try and go into project management, but yeah, now I'm just love regulatory and everything, the purpose behind it, which I can go into at some point. So yeah, did med devices mainly at Reckitt and Johnson & Johnson, and then went into a smaller company which did med devices, medicines, cosmetics, biocides, detergents, food. No, they didn't do food supplements, but yeah, pretty much everything. And because it was a smaller team, I really got to then see all the other parts of the business. So supply chain, logistics, marketing, sales, all of that. And I learned so much more then about regulatory and kind of stepped away from what I would kind of say was like a silo of just doing maybe a technical file or an artwork review and not really understanding what I was kind of doing or the purpose of it, to actually then understanding the impact on a consumer, the impact on a business. And then kind of thought, well, I really enjoy this, but I like working on lots of different brands, lots of different projects, lots of different people. So I got given the opportunity to go and work at a startup, which I did. Managed to successfully, and that's where I learned food supplements, managed to successfully launch the brand worldwide, and realized, well, I was consulting to them. So I realized, well, I can do it for them. So I might as well do it for others. And just kind of thought, it'll just be some sort of thing that I can do alongside in the evenings, weekends for other people. And well, yeah, now we're here where we are and doing it for lots of other people. It's now a full-blown consultancy, no longer a consultant or a freelancer. So it's been a bit of a whirlwind and a massive learning curve, but I love regulatory and quality. So it's great. It's great to come to work every day.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say there about sort of the parallels working at, say, a company like Reckitt and then a smaller business. I mean, I've certainly seen that in the past, where even in my own experience, and then when I've been like looking at hiring people, if they're in a company like Reckitt, for example, they're so good at really specific parts of the sort of chain that they're in, be that logistics or regulatory or something like that, or even in the sales team. Whereas when you're in a much smaller organization, they may not be as good at a very, very specific skill, but they a lot more well-rounded generally. But yeah, it's really interesting, the kind of parallels between the two. But just to go back slightly, so how has it been found in your business? Because I mentioned it's January 2023, so relatively speaking, it's still early days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I would say that I was quite fortunate starting the business, as in when I did it, it was when I joined that startup. And I never kind of want to downplay that I did kind of have a fortunate start to the business, because I know it's very difficult on the first few months, but I had a full-time contract. So I had a nice safety blanket to expand the business. So when I kind of then thought about taking the next step and expanding it, for me, the biggest kind of like hurdle and everything was believing in myself. because I was going from what I did, as I mentioned, this like safety blanket that I had a full-time contract. Obviously, I was still a contractor, so there was still risk, but I had a full-time contract and then was building the business alongside it. But it was kind of then to step away and being like, well, then now I'm responsible for my salary. And I know that sounds really bizarre because when you're in a big corporate or another company, someone else is responsible for your salary and you're paying your mortgages and, well, not mortgages, but mortgage and your bills and things like that. Whereas then I became responsible for it. I then became responsible for the work that I sent to clients. I became responsible for my liability. Obviously, doing regulatory consultancy, the liability are pretty high. So it was more believing in myself. But in terms of like actually setting up the business, for me, setting up a business is easy. You go onto company's house and register it and it's boom, done. It's really not difficult. What for me was the hardest was getting myself known in the industry, getting people knowing that I do consultancy now, getting people to trust you because, sometimes we get up against big clients and they want us to pitch for work. And then they look at you and you're like, well, you've only been doing this for 2 years. And you might be up against a global consultancy with thousands of employees. How can you really give that credibility? So for me, the key thing was looking at was what are we unique compared to other consultancy firms? And then that I didn't know what the answer was to begin with. And I think it was only over time when we started doing more projects, I realized how we were different and we were a lot more personable. We were a lot more like part of the team. We answer emails quickly, which I know sounds really strange, but apparently that's quite unique in the industry. We're contactable and things like that. And we still go and visit our clients. We're very like tactile, I suppose, with everything we do. So it's been stressful. It's been fun. But it's been a big learning curve. But it's been the best learning curve ever. I don't think I'll ever go back to working for anyone else ever again now. So yeah, I've really enjoyed it.
It's interesting. There's a lot to unpack there, and a lot of I spot a lot of similarities in my own journey. I mean, it's not to do with me today, but I also, when I first started, got consultancy work quite quickly, which was great for that kind of underlying security.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also a fine balance because it can take up so much of your time that you're then so conscious that you're vulnerable to that going, but you also don't have as much time to build something alongside it because it can become so time consuming. Yeah. What was the other part I was going to comment on?
I was going to say, because on that, it's a good point, because I know when I decided to end my full-time contract and step away and go, right, I'm not going to be doing, because I was working full-time for this one company. And like you say, I was doing other stuff in the evenings and weekends, but running a business is not just doing day-to-day work. And I don't know about you, but I still probably do 100% full-time work and then use my evenings and weekends to do the business work. Because it's when you're a small company, it's really difficult to then be like, right, this morning, I'm just going to focus on growing the business, because it does bring in the company money, but you see it a longer term reward. Whereas if you've got client work that you need to do that morning, you're kind of like, well, I got to get this done because that's what brings the money in. So for me, it was that big step. And I do know the first few months when I'd ended that contract, the bank balance felt a bit sore compared to what it did before. But then it quite quickly just picked up. And loads of people say to me, like, how did you get clients? How did you do this? And I don't really know the answer. And everyone just says to me, well, you're obviously doing stuff, but it's just putting myself out there, like you say, with my LinkedIn, marketing, going to events, using my network. And it just kind of then grew. And then I think you'll probably get to the same point, or maybe even there now, like referrals is then where it then just becomes when you think, okay, cool, now we know the company's kind of where it needs to be. Because I love getting referrals. That's when you know your clients are happy.
Yeah, well, I don't think there's any better way of growing a business, really, or more. The ratio of sort of success and failure must be the highest on word of mouth referrals.
Definitely.
And the other thing it just clicked back was those early days. I think when you're working for someone else, you kind of it gets frustrating when you win or lose things, particularly in a sales role. But I think you kind of, after a while, you just get so used to it, it doesn't matter anymore. But then I certainly found early on the sting of not winning business was so much more impactful, because it's like you say, you are solely responsible from that point for what comes in or doesn't come in. So that, as a sales rep back in, when I first started my career, at the end of the day, it didn't matter really if a deal came through or not, because I was still going to get paid. Whereas it became a point of, if I don't get this deal, I do not earn any money. And I think the romance of that whole self-employed thing is there for sure. There's a lot more freedom and flexibility and things like that. And like you say, it's the thought to go back to the confines of a full-time role is not not as attractive now. But
no, definitely. No, and I know that I've lost a few clients, or I've had clients and then, they've then said, oh, we're going to bring the regulatory in-house, and I'm like, oh, what have we done wrong? And I think that's what it was at the start. What have I done wrong? What's wrong with... And I had to realise, no, that this is just business. And I think, like you say, that was a very tough process to go through, because I remember when I first got ghosted, when, people ask you have a meeting and then they just ignore you. And I took it really personal. And it was quite funny. I was speaking to our Google Ads consultants, and they said to me, God, people in your industry, they just ghost all the time. Like, how do you deal with that? And I'm like, oh, it's usual. It's normal. Like now, and that's just common. But then if you think about it, how many times do you contact like an electrician or a builder and get a quote and then never contact them back again? We all do it, but you probably don't realize the impact it's having on someone, and that's the impact it's having on me. And then I think now, with having staff, I don't even care about I do care about my salary in some ways, but I don't care about having to pay me. That's almost secondary. Now I need to pay my staff. And I think that for me, when I hired last year, my whole mindset had to change again with the business. Rather than, now I'm responsible for my own salary and bringing in work, every time I won work, it was now, okay, cool, right, I know I'm good now to cover their salary for the year, or cover it for this, or they can go on this training course. It all became that, because it came all then about, I wanted to develop them. And I think now I enjoy more being in this position than looking after my own salary, because I feel like I think it resonates with my core values, that now I'm like little family. I know work's not a little family, but when we're such a small company, it is. And it's nice to see people grow, and then they get excited when they win contracts. They're like, oh my God, we've got this. And it's just so nice to see. So yeah, it's good.
So that kind of takes us on nicely to say, how has the business evolved since inception, and what kind of key milestones are you most proud of through that?
So I'd say, at the start, a lot of it, in terms of it evolving, was just me winging it and firefighting and figuring out what people actually use consultants for. Because I know it sounds a really stupid thing to say, but I know when I was in-house what we use consultants for, but that's just a small part of it. For me, I know I worked out that it was very vital that if we were offering responsible person services for the UK, everyone wanted the EU as well. If you only had the UK, they're not really that bothered to work with you, because they just want one consultant. So straight away I had to set up the EU entity. So that's not as fun now with Brexit. So that was definitely a big milestone. Then in terms of evolving it, what I learned pretty quickly was I need to stop doing a lot of the admin and a lot of the invoicing, contracts, all of that, because it takes a lot of time. So then I brought in my mother. My father used to own a business, so there was only one person that I could trust, which was her. She's definitely trying to wind down and retire and look after my 2-year-old nephew and 1-year-old niece, but she's now also working for me. So I don't think I quite gave her that winding down period. But I just decided, right, I'm just going to outsource that to actually free myself up. So that was kind of the first step of evolving. And then it got to the point where I got engaged last June, and which was amazing. And I get married soon, so that's all exciting. And I got back to the hotel room just after getting engaged and said to my other half, just need to send a few emails and do a bit of work. I'm surprised I'm still getting married. And that's when it kind of was a conversation of, do you think you need to hire someone now? And up to that point, I'd use freelancers, I'd use contractors, or however they want to position themselves. And it just didn't work for me because I put my life and soul into the business. And I don't want my team to put their life and soul into it because it's my business, and I get it, you know, they're in the role that I used to be at Reckitt, and I didn't put my life and soul into that because, you know, it's just a job type thing. But I want people that enjoy being part of the team and the family, and they want to see the company grow. And that also means then I can put value into them to see them grow and then move up into new roles and positions. And with a freelancer, you can't really do that because they're not part of the business. But then to take on someone else's salary, support someone's mortgage, like, I just was like, can I not do it? Can I not do it? All these things. So I hired Maria, who does all our cosmetics. It took me so long to hire someone because I was so anxious about doing it. But when I had her final interview, I just thought, well, if I'm going to do it with anyone, this is the person to do it with. And she is the best. It has been the best thing I've ever done. And so then since then, we've now expanded to a team of 6. And we've got 2 new graduates joining in July. So it's been pretty wild. It took me 4 months to hire the graduates still, because it's still so, even now I'm still nervous about them coming in. There's still that doubt. Have I hired the right people? Because I can't absorb slackers. I can't absorb if people aren't performing because we're so small. And also, can I give them what they need? Because that when Maria joined, I was so slammed with work. I didn't have time to train her, but she came in qualified anyway. But, you know, she's cosmetics. I wanted to train her on food supplements and med devices. And now we've done it and everything, but I wasn't giving her what I wanted to give her when she joined because I was too busy. And so, yeah, that's why I'm still hesitant with the grads. It's like, you know, they're brand new into work. They're going to need a hell of a lot of support, a lot of help. They know nothing. Probably don't even know like what a safety data sheet is and things like that. I don't even know if they know what a medical device is. Well, I interviewed them, so I know they know a little bit, but you know what I mean? It's so different. So yeah, the company's evolved loads, and kind of, I think I've evolved with it a lot, but I'd still say that I'm still anxious every time I do something with the company.
I think that's probably quite normal. I mean,
Yeah.
I haven't taken that leap yet, but even the thought of it fills me with absolute, well, not dread, but I mean, you'll have experienced it too. The amount of things that you didn't know when you started that you had to learn, and I guess all of us are a little bit arrogant when we do start a business to think we can do it, and we'll have that, you know, overconfidence, and then you think, geez, actually, there's a lot of stuff I don't know here, and then you work out quite quickly how little you know at the time, which is then good, but then that also makes it difficult to step into uncharted territory, like hiring people, because you're like, okay, there's so much now I need to learn, and then that's going to put, although in the longer term you're taking away other responsibilities ideally for the right candidates. And like you say about graduates, yeah, I've hired graduates in the past. It's so hard to know who to hire as a graduate because, with all respect to them, most of their CVs look exactly the same as each other because none of them have really done a lot to that point. So then it really is interviewing a person, and then it's like you don't want to make it like a popularity contest, but You don't really have a huge amount else to go off of. But yeah, so but hey, going to six staff in just over 2 years is, I mean, that's a hell of an achievement. So, congratulations, and congratulations on the engagement as well.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I wouldn't recommend doing it all at once. We just need to move house now, and then it would be like the worst point of our life: wedding, business, and a house.
Well, we had twins 3 weeks after I launched my business, so that was which was partially why I did it, but yeah, also not to be recommended. The first sort of 2 months, I mean, I say I had a business, but I don't know how much I really was in the business, but
the sleeping
still going. So there we go. Yeah. So the business itself, so I mentioned earlier, it's aimed towards FMCG companies, medical devices, cosmetics, food supplements. We've talked about that already. Can you explain how those sort of different sectors pose different challenges and how you kind of overcome those, or how you work through those?
Yeah, no, of course. So if we start with med devices, because that's kind of like the highest regulatory kind of framework that we work with. In terms of the issues and problems we see is non-compliance and not understanding what needs to be done, which you could probably think, oh, we could apply that across all of them, but I don't feel like they're the biggest hurdles with the other classifications. So for example, the med device regulation, if we're speaking about like the UK, we're kind of speaking like the old MDD or medical device directive. If we're speaking the EU, we're speaking about the new MDR, medical device regulation. So for people that don't know, like they've completely upheld the medical device regulation, and now it's a lot more strict, and it's all focused around like consumer safety. And I'd say that we get a lot of people that are wanting to buy products from overseas and sell them under their name, and they don't understand quite the liability that they're taking on and what they need to ensure. And they don't understand like the quality management system they need behind it. And they don't understand like if their product should be a med device. So I know when we spoke, it was asking about like what were like my industry insights type thing. And the best way to explain this is LED face masks. Okay. Now, these really get under my skin. I don't know why. They just really get under my skin. So LED face masks obviously used to be more just like a clinic-based thing. So you'd go into clinic, have this face mask on, meant to be with aging, acne, all these type of things. I can say all these claims because I'm not trying to sell anything at the moment, so I don't need to regulate what I'm saying. But then they became more like a consumable. So you can just buy them in Boots now or Selfridges, wherever you kind of want. And they're expensive. You're looking at like £300-400 a device. And we have people contact us saying, oh, can you help us regulate this med device? Now, for me, this device, if you're making acne claims, is a medical device because you're trying to cure or prevent a disease, acne. If you're saying anti-aging, it's not really, it's not a medical condition. It's a cosmetic. But the cosmetic legislation does not allow a mask, LED face mask, to be a cosmetic because it needs to be a mixture or substance. So what does it then become? It's just an electrical product. So what we see then, if we say to a client, right, you've got this LED face mask, you can be a medical device or an electrical product. Your med device, you're going to need a whole technical file. You've got to do ISO 13485. It's probably going to be higher than a class 1. Well, it will be. So you're going to need a notified body. It's probably going to cost you a few $100,000. Or you take off a claim and you can be an electrical product. We all know which route they're going to go down. And the problem with me is then, for me, I kind of see that they don't understand really what they're doing because this product should be regulated as a medical device. It's got LED lights in it. It's used really close to the skin, and not just the skin, to the facial skin. It's being used near your eyes. And there's not the testing done under the electrical product to make sure that that is safe there. like, yeah, generally it's used to save, like, you know, if there's going to be a power cut, is it going to switch off and things like that. But there's no compatibility data that will be done with the skin. There's no efficacy data or anything. And so for me, what with med devices, we find that there's a lot of non-compliances. One, because people will just launch them and not register them and do it under a class 1 and they're not checked. Or 2, they don't understand the regulation and so then aren't classifying their product correctly, or will try and go for a less regulated product. So that's kind of why I get frustrated. So please only ever buy a medical device LED face mask. I have one; they're good, but has been regulated properly. And yeah, I'd kind of say that's with the med device. And I think, you know, as I kind of said, like a few £100,000 minimum, maybe, if you're starting from scratch, people just don't want to spend the money. So I appreciate that it does stop innovation potentially. But I think what people potentially forget with regulatory, it's here to ensure safety. And I think people forget that when you then start saying prices and timelines. So yeah, so I'd kind of say that's with the med devices, what are big hurdles. With the cosmetics, our biggest hurdles are probably that people want to make medicinal claims on cosmetics, because we've seen a big trend now of a lot of aesthetic doctors launching brands. So like probably the biggest one that I know is, for example, like 111 Skin. They're a Harley Street clinic, and then they've launched a brand off the back of it, and it's doctor led. They do a lot of invasive procedures in their clinics, and now they've got a skincare brand. But if you then say to like a certified aesthetics doctor, like, you can't make these claims on this product because they're medicinal, that's really disheartening, because they've developed a product that probably is really good, probably can do what it needs to do, but you can't make those claims under the cosmetic regulation. So a lot of the hurdles we face with cosmetics is trying to get brands to reposition their products to make them cosmetics rather than medicines. Now try having that conversation. It's very difficult, because you're effectively like just dampening all their marketing. And I do say that people get really disheartened there. So our hurdles there really are, how can we help brands launch an innovative product, a product that they can differentiate in the market but still comply to the legislation? And that's really difficult. I say that's what we spend a lot of our time on. And even with the food supplements, like, we'll spend a lot of time with claims with our clients on how they can position their food supplements to be differentiated to other competitors, but still not making non-approved health claims or medicinal claims. So I'd kind of say, yeah, a lot of it's around the positioning for cosmetics and food supplements because I'd kind of say, like, you know, the cosmetics ingredients, they're usually compliant. You get all the testing done and tick all those boxes. The same with the food supplements, but we can't always solve their problems with the claims that they want to make that they can't make. And that's the hardest part to do.
Yeah. So would you say some of the regulations can be prohibitive for certainly for smaller companies or smaller innovators?
Yeah, definitely. It's weird. Murray and I are actually having a chat this morning about a pet care company that have come to us that want to do pet cosmetics. And when I was on the phone to the client, I said, I've never done pet cosmetics. And I rang Maria and I was like, right, I've looked into it. There's no regulation. And I said, it comes under general product. And we were both like mind blown. Like, for a shampoo for a pet, it's a general product. Okay. So firstly, I think there's the parts where it's restrictive, but then there's the parts when there's no guidance. Mm-hmm. But when we go back to like the parts where it's restricted, for example, with food supplements, if you've got a probiotic, can you say probiotic on the product? No, it's an unapproved health claim. No. That's really strange, because if it's got probiotics in it, why can't you just say probiotic, because you're kind of describing it, but it's classified as an unapproved health claim. And so if you then want to submit to get it approved as a claim, the evidence package you need to generate is vast, and brands can't afford to do it. But the internal debate I have with myself is there's a reason those processes are there, to ensure consumer safety, but are those processes outdated? And is there a more efficient way to be able to ensure consumer safety without these timelines? So, but then I think it all comes down to resource at the authorities and things having to get passed by Parliament and things like that. So yeah, I definitely understand for the frustrations, but I think the brands that are winning in market are the brands that are navigating the regulatory landscape to their benefit and being innovative with it, over the brands that are like, oh, well, it's disruptive, or it's just a tick box exercise, or it's just a roadblock. They're the brands that won't be winning, because it's like moaning about something that you can't change.
Yeah, it is super tricky. You know, and like you say, it is there for a reason, and the fact that it is a certain, there are, in certain ways, it is a commercial advantage to people who make products in another country to not have to jump through those hoops and leap those hurdles. But at the end of the day, I do think the consumers are getting, or are sort of wisening up a lot more, particularly in cosmetics, as to what they are using and what they are applying. So you are right that it should be seen as an advantage, but it's really difficult to think like that. You know, like we said earlier, when maybe you're fighting fires, or you're not quite in a position where you can afford to take the time and invest the money to get yourself fully compliant, or whatever that means in the certain case. And you're right about pet care, you know, and some people don't even, and some people's immediate thought is, you know, the poor animal, but it's also the person applying the products too that is also at risk. And people kind of weirdly forget that they also are at risk to those two. And I did see an interesting thing the other day about, you know, the use of pictograms on everyday products around the house. You know, it's like your surface cleaner or your surface wipe gets the same pictogram as the heavy duty drain and blocker you use, but they absolutely are not the same in terms of severity. So yeah, there's, like you say, some of this may be a little bit outdated or needs to be looked at, but I mean, who knows where to start with that?
No, that's the thing. And, you know, back to the pet care thing, I didn't even, you know, you've just said, obviously, the consumer, no, sorry, the person using the product on the pet. I didn't even think about that. And it was quite strange, because when I say like there's a lot of liability with regulatory, obviously, if we say to our client, okay, cool, we can check that pet care's fine, and then it's not, I'm sure they'll come knocking on our door. So, you know, Maria and I were saying, you know, okay, the legislation says use general products, but we're going to do general products, probably look at it against the cosmetic regulation as well, see if there's any biocidal things going on. But brands then don't want to pay for that, which then, you know, you have to get to that point as well in a business when you then say, okay, we can't support you with this, because you know, as much as I hate to turn down work, I don't want to also be responsible for putting a non-compliant product on the market. And I think that's kind of where my passion came for with regulatory, was always making sure that the end consumer was safe, and that the end consumer was not misled. And that's what it, for me, is always at the back of my mind whenever I'm thinking about a project or a product or a client. Can I ensure that? And if I can't, then I say, okay, I can't do it. So that might be the pet care one, I'll let you know. Might be the first one that I'm just like, no thanks.
So another thing I mentioned earlier, and you touched on very briefly, was about quality management systems. So I guess the first question is, what is a quality management system, and why are they important, particularly in consumer safety?
Yeah. Okay, so a quality management system varies dependent on the classification, dependent on what your activities you're doing, if you're manufacturing, if you're supply chain. But in essence, a quality management system ensures that the end product you put on the shelf or provide to the consumer or place on the market is always of the same standard as per some defined specification or rules. What then you need to do within that quality management system varies. So med devices, you need to comply to ISO 13485. Well, I caveat that with you don't need to. You need to comply to the quality management requirements in the regulation, but 13485 is usually what most people get certified to, just in case there's anyone there to pick up my corrections. And then for like cosmetics, it's ISO 22716. You'll see a lot of people have ISO 9001. And for most people, these are not just, people are just quoting numbers and letters at me. What does it mean? But in essence, what it means is you're going to create a load of documents, a load of SOPs, standard operating procedures, a load of procedures to say, okay, right, when you've got a raw material coming in, what is your process to check that that raw material that you ordered is the raw material that you've received, that you store it in the correct place, that it's labeled correctly? Because in essence, if you don't do all those things, if you ordered ingredient A, you might receive ingredient B, you might store it somewhere else that's it's not meant to be stored. So actually what goes into the finished product is ingredient C. So it's about, it can go wrong pretty quickly. So it's about ensuring that, the finished product is what it is. And if anything, they're vital, but people don't want them. They don't want them because they're process and it slows things down and it takes up so much resource. Like if you implement a quality management system, you'll need quality analysts, you'll need QC quality controllers, you'll need them to stay on top of it. You'll need to get audited by a third party. You'll need to pay them a lot of money to do that. They'll then probably give you non-conformities unless you're amazing, and then you'll have to correct them. It's a lot of time and money, but in essence, it's protecting the brand as well as the consumer, because I don't know if you've seen it. Do you know James Smith, who's the big, massive fitness influencer? And he does,
Name rings a bell.
yeah, well, he did this video where he took a food supplement they were creating gummies.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah. I've seen those advertised a lot. Yeah.
yeah, and it was a competitor of, well, no, it was one brand he was going to buy. And he tested them to see if they actually had the right amount of creatinine, because he was like, it doesn't feel gritty, it doesn't feel disgusting, these taste really good. And I think, don't quote me on this, maybe it was meant to have like 5 mg or something, and it had like 0.01 mg when he measured it or something. The company literally, after he launched this video, put their website on pause, and so they're not selling anymore. And they've got to correct all of this. If they had a quality management system in process, they would have had a specification that they would have given to their manufacturer. They would have then had some release documentation that would probably be issued on the certificate of analysis, which would have included testing of the creatine. They would have then realised that their product doesn't have what they're then declaring on the labelling. So not having that quality management system has now caused that company to close down or stop selling. So yeah, it's a lot of money, it's a lot of effort, but the impact to a brand is crazy. And I don't think people realise that. And when we say to them, like, well, this is what can happen, I don't think people believe it. So yeah, definitely recommend getting one. Like, for example, we even have one in-house because we take on responsible person services for our clients. And that's to make sure that the products we're representing are still compliant. And yeah, they're really vital. They're intense. They're lengthy. I don't audit them because I leave that to the experts because I find it a little bit boring. But yeah, it's just vital to have. And I think that's why we work across both reg and quality, because they are so intertwined. Because whenever I'm approving something on a label, I need to be checking with the quality team to making sure that that's definitely what's in the product.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen examples of it throughout my career, in not in my own business, but I'm sure I will, but in bigger companies where it was really small things that you don't think about that have kind of tripped them up. So, for example, one was simply not having brake seals on IBCs. So to know who has opened that IBC when, I mean, the story was 6 IBCs of the same product, same batch, 3, the customer popped the lid off, kind of almost dipped a ladle in to take a sample out of 3 of them. 3 of them were contaminated. The other 3 were not, that had not been opened and sampled. And our company had to pay £160,000 or something for lost finished goods because of the contaminated product we had sent them. Because there's no brake seals, there's no proof that of when the contaminant was added to the product. So that was one small step, and another one was around.
I was going to say the fix is probably quite a cheap fix compared to £160,000.
Bring them back and send some new ones. And the other one was, which was the company in question's fault, was not washing down their production site properly after a cleaning cycle. And some of the cleaner used in the plant making its way all the way to an IBC on the other side of the globe when it was picked up. And again, because of, like you say, the SOP should be in place to say, once you've run this cleaning cycle, you wash down the plant 5 times, whatever it is, you then take a sample to check that there's no residual cleaning products left over. And, like you say, it's really dry, it's really dull, but it's really important.
Oh, 100%. And I think for me, like when we work with the supplement stuff, it's allergens. And people don't take allergens seriously. And they kill people. And that's what really scares me when I speak to clients and they've got nut-free on their product, and I say, oh, have you got your test results? Oh, no, we don't test because none of the raw materials have nuts in them and the manufacturer doesn't produce anything with nuts, so it doesn't matter. And I'm like, cross-contamination? Residual? And that can kill someone. And I don't understand sometimes why brands don't worry about that. And I don't know why it is. I don't know what the answer is. I think, sometimes these small things, when your company's big, kind of get lost, that, oh, well, it's just a claim. It's not actually that. It gets lost. And I suppose that's why, like you say, it's really important to have these processes, and even just stupid things like a customer complaint process, because that's where you then pick up what you need to change on your quality management. And don't get me wrong, when a customer complaint comes in and someone asks me to look at it, it is the worst task of my day. Not very customer focused in terms of being like, we're really sorry about this. So I never draft the email response. But they're so vital, they're so important, and it can save a company hundreds of thousands, millions if they do it all right.
Well, I'm hoping to get, I don't know if you've heard of the company Creative Nature, but I'm hoping to get a lady on who founded Creative Nature, Julianne Ponan. So they do complete allergy-free confectionery products. So she suffers from a lot of allergies herself. She does a lot of things. Her kind of marketing thing is to say, you wouldn't eat something that says may contain glass. And she said that's every time she goes to eat a snack that may contain something, that's the risk that she's running every single time. Gosh. And the amount of vegan products they highlight that may contain dairy. And it's like, how is that even coming anywhere close to this? So, I mean, they've built a really, really successful business. You'll see it in most supermarket aisles now in the free from section.
Yeah. No, it's funny about the thing when you say vegan and then may contain dairy. I've had one where it's gluten-free claim and then on the back says may contain gluten. The legislation does state that you're not allowed to do that, and as such it was changed, but that's a really difficult one to understand. because it
Oh,
basically isn't gluten free from someone that's got celiac. So yeah.
yeah, you think it was common sense, but the problem is not enough. Well, I imagine if you suffer from that severely, you probably are more aware than the average Joe walking down the street. For certain, I certainly was not aware that you can have a vegan product that may contain dairy, and I only just learned that you can have a gluten-free product which may contain gluten. So it's
And
insane.
yeah, and I think this thing is the brands don't see it as that's really confusing for a consumer, and that's just not correct. They see it as, well, our product, it's gluten free, but because of where we produce it, there might be cross contamination, so we're just going to put this disclaimer, we're covered, it's fine. No, that's not the way you need to be thinking. You don't need to be thinking we're covered because we've put this disclaimer. You need to be thinking, what is the end, how's the end user's experience, how is their safety being protected? And that's what I think sometimes people with brands forget, that there actually is someone at the end that takes that product. It's not
Yeah, they
just
got to
a
have. Yeah, got to have a they should have a more strategic or longer term view on it, because if you, especially in those sorts of industries, say take creative nature for example, I'm sure that if they're getting their some of their raw materials from a company that has always complied, always is, we do not contain XYZ, they are, I'm sure it's going to be so difficult to budge them from that supplier,
oh,
because
100%, yeah.
if especially in food and beverage, shifting suppliers is nigh on impossible to do, because people, it's just such a high risk thing to do, to change your supplier. So yeah, people really need to think more like that.
Oh yeah, definitely. And that's where this may contain gluten came in. The client moved from a manufacturer to another one for a cost saving activity and didn't realize to do complete due diligence on allergens. Their old manufacturing facility did not use any gluten. Their new one does. So now they can't make the claim. And I don't know what percentage of their buyers buy the product because it's gluten free. I don't have that data, but I imagine it will have some impact. So potentially your cost savings might not actually be cost savings long term. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's
and
crazy. It's
brand,
all the,
yeah,
and I
brand
think that's
damage.
from working in a smaller company. They're all the intertwining things that you figure out. And like you say, like when you work at a big corporate, you probably don't ever see all those things. So, and that's what I think excites me now about having consultancy. I love all of these sort of conversations and intricacies and learning more about the strategy of a brand.
So just while we wind it down, so how do you see regulations moving forward? Because I know there's sort of a lot more of a view on sustainability initiatives, and I'm interested in your take on how those might kind of impact from a regulatory perspective.
From sustainability in particular, or just generally in terms of regulation?
Well, generally, but I mean, from someone who knows a lot less about regulations than yourself, I know sustainability is such a big buzzword at the moment, and I'm interested to know if you see if there's going to be any sort of forced changes on companies.
So there is like draft legislation, and in some markets, for example, France, they do have labelling requirements for like recycling and things like that. What do I personally feel with a sustainability perspective? And I don't know if my view is potentially a little bit controversial, but I think I'm known for saying what I think, so I might as well do that. The thing I have wrong with sustainability or recyclable or reusable plastics, where they like take blends and make a product, is the traceability. And I think that's the one thing about sustainability and recycling that concerns me, and I'm not quite sure how the legislation will overcome that. Because say, for example, if you're taking plastic bottles from 10 different sources, putting them into recyclable plastics, putting that into a bottle, if something goes wrong, how can you get full traceability back to the end or the starting product? I don't think you can. And I also think for sustainability to really come into force and brands to start moving their products into more sustainable packaging or more sustainable sources of ingredients, there needs to be cheaper ways of doing it, because it's not viable for brands to move at the moment, because then also the end consumer gets hit. So I think for me, and I don't know if this is just me echoing my view, because I try and buy stuff that's sustainable, you know, those small tablets that you put in and you put water in, and then that's your disinfectant and stuff like this. But they're expensive. And times are tough, you know. It's more expensive in living, and do consumers just fundamentally, if you need a disinfectant for your kitchen, do you just buy the cheapest one? So I think that, you know, I do think some legislation will come in, or more legislation or more guidance and things like that. But I do think there's going to be like a lot of pushback from industry. And if anything, I think there's more things that need to be changed with the legislation beforehand from a consumer safety perspective. And for me, that's more important. I might get shouted at for that, but I think there's more things that need to be changed from a legislation point of view, especially with the supplement industry. It's the Wild West at the moment. And for me, that should be where the priority is over sustainability. Sorry, planet and Earth.
It's funny you mentioned supplements, because I'd had written down, because I knew we'd used up quite a lot of time. I'd had written down to ask you about supplements, because I know you are quite vocal about supplements, particularly versus sort of pharmaceutical products and things like that. But perhaps we'll have to have a second round to attack
yeah.
supplements,
stress
or at
claims,
least legislation.
Yeah, definitely.
Hey, Bethany, thank you so much for joining us today, sharing your insights into, you know, not only regulation, quality management, things like that, but also building a business, you know, and how you've managed to do that over the last just over 2 years, and congratulations to you for doing that. But before we do conclude, could you please share with listeners where they can learn more about you, Taylored Consultancy, and how they can connect with you?
Yeah, of course. So you can follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, and I now got a TikTok, so you can follow us on TikTok.
Wow,
I think
nice.
Yeah, I know. Apparently, it's the new thing now. So yeah, it's all under Taylored Consultancy. Or feel free to connect with me directly on LinkedIn, Bethany Dean, and yeah, come and see some of my controversial videos or interesting videos with my hats on, which will make more sense if you look at the videos.
No, thank you so much, and thanks for the people listening in. And final thank you to sponsors for today's episode, Chemian, again helping companies reduce the carbon footprint of their water treatment processes using low carbon technologies. So till next time, bye bye.